Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the BEA. The part number is literally Restroom Kit, is what this is, Restroom Kit. I am somewhat unfamiliar with what's in this box, so this is my first time seeing this. Okay. Sure. Let's see what we're doing here. We've got a wall switch. Door magnet, which is going to tell the system when the door has been opened and closed. Your relay, BR3X. Okay, so let's start this out like all good installers do by looking first at the installation instructions. Okay, let's take a look. BEA products to which this application note applies. Restroom kit and emergency kit. This is great. So this isn't a complete restroom kit. What a restroom kit is, so it is code in Canada, and they do expect it to happen in the United States at some point, where you have a restroom and you can have an automatic operator on it. Okay, you can have a button on the outside, a push plate, wireless wired push plate. Hit the push plate, the operator opens the door. You obviously have to have some sort of locking hardware on the door, like a storeroom lock. You have to have something that will release the latch, either electric latch retraction on some type of lock or an electric strike. Electric strike to me is the least elegant way to do it, but it is in many instances the most practical. And then what you also have is an emergency call button on the inside of the restroom area, on the inside of the restroom. You will also have a switch next to the door so that you can operate. You can shunt the exterior push button from operating when it's occupied. Okay, and the components that are in here are not everything you would need. There's no operator. There's no electric strike, but there are the other parts. There is the exterior switch. There is the door magnet. There is a sounder or an annunciator. Annunciators may be required as well. There's an annunciator, and then there's a relay. Okay, the relay is the brain box that tells everything to do, what needs to happen. You'll have. You will have your exterior occupied when lit. Push to lock. Occupied when lit. That may be the same. That is your interior operation. It's also telling you on the inside whether or not, you can see visually from the inside whether or not you're shunted or locked on the outside. And what makes all of this work, quite frankly, is the door magnet. The door magnet is what will tell the door, when the door opens and then closes again, that closing action is going to shunt the exterior. Now, as all things BEA, their paperwork is simple and straightforward. It is really, really easy to put together. Right. And they literally have on. This is the first time I've ever seen this. Now I've done. I'm familiar with restroom kits, not from BEA, from another manufacturer, but the concept is the same because code is driving this. They do expect this to, at some point, be in the United States as well, and you would be, in my opinion, as a door and hardware distributor, you would be well suited to be familiar with the different combinations and configurations of put this material together, because it's likely going to be in our near code future. If you are an end user, this video is for you too. We're going to go over it. Now, like I said, all things BEA, their paperwork is really simple and straightforward. And literally on page 1, we're doing a restroom kit, not an emergency kit. It lists, we've got our relay, we've got our push to lock button on the inside, we've got our occupied indicator, and our door position switch. That's everything. There's 4 items. And again, it's the door position switch that's really important. It's really what makes everything work. Now, so in this simple scenario, they're doing, in this relatively simple scenario, they're doing this without an automatic operator, which, okay, is great. Here's how it would work. You would, enter manually, okay? In this kit, looking at these parts, there will be a indicator on the outside, occupied when lit. They do have this, we're calling it a sounder. I don't know that it is an annunciator. No, it wouldn't be. This would not be a sounder because this is a restroom kit, not an emergency kit. An emergency kit's going to give you an annunciator. So this is our exterior side, occupied when lit. Okay, so get these pieces taken out one by one here. The way that this works is, let's just say that you have a mortise lock. It is a goodness. It could just be a storeroom function. Always locked on the outside, always unlocked on the inside. You will literally take the lock. You can't rotate the handle, but you can just push the door in because the electric strike is fail-safe. Okay, so you will, or it's fail-secure. No, it wouldn't be fail-secure. You're going to have a fail-safe strike. It could be fail-secure. You've got to think about how you're going to wire that. If it's fail-safe and you're normally unlocked, you will be able to walk up to the door. The outside indicator is off. Nothing's happening. You'll enter. The electric strike, because it's fail-safe, is unlocked. It will just let you in. You come into the inside. Now you got to tell the system that you are on the inside. And that is going to be via the interior push button to lock system. So now you're on the inside. Okay, you're going to push that. It's going to close the circuit to the electric strike. Now you're locked. Okay. So, how do you get out? Well, it's a storeroom function, so you can always exit. So that's not a big deal. But how does the system know to deactivate this little gizmo here, the door switch, the magnet, the door magnet? When that door is opened, it resets the system, bringing it back to strike is now fail-safe. The circuit is open. There's no power. The outside light is now no longer illuminated. And that's done by this common switch. If it was me, I would prefer to use a switch that would be concealed. I'm thinking park district, public bathroom. I'd want to conceal the hardware as best as possible. I might look for a concealed option. I don't make a living as an installer, but I make a living as a hardware salesperson to people who buy hardware as a result of vandalization. This would be something, obviously, that would be more prone to tampering because it's visible. That's how this system works. But what keeps it all running is the BR3X relay. And here it is. Okay. This is going to get installed somewhere in your system in a safe place. And this might look incredibly overwhelming to you. Ain't no reason for that, because the wiring diagram is included. and we're going to take a tour of the two wiring diagrams. Okay, so the second, again, like all things BEA, their paperwork's simple. You will not use this other page because you're not doing the emergency add-on kit. It's nice to look at it and see what else happens. But what else happens is a plate on the inside that you will be able to, obviously you would like to place it within reach of the commode, call for emergency assistance. There will be a signal. There will be a indicator on the exterior side as well. I don't see an annunciator or a sounder, but in my coursework of learning about this material, that is possibly required by local code. Okay, you might need a sounder as well, and they do indicate they call the part number 10 LED sounder, and that is indeed what this is. I don't know if there's anything audible on this or not. I don't believe. No, there isn't. This, when I say sounder, this is a visual indication. You could easily add a annunciator to the system. I'm quite sure that that's correct. Okay, so let's do a little closer review of the actual parts. Then we're going to look at the installation instructions together on the screen. And let's pick up with a review of the actual parts at this point. Now, there are several supporting documents down below, and we're going to start with the installation instructions as a guide by which to go through all of our visual review of the individual components. So the relay or the logic module, this needs to be obviously placed in some out-of-the-way location. And all of this will come in play on the wiring diagram. What's important to know is that the relay module will handle a powering of an electric strike because it will have the capability for a wet terminal, a wet contact, a wet meaning voltage is present at the unit. So that is very helpful in the sense that you'll have the ability to fire up your electric strike. It's just not included in the package. Okay, so, and the setting of the jumpers is how you'll produce wet voltage at relay 1. So if you're going to power an electric strike with this, you'll be sure not to supply any power to the electric strike. It's going to be powered through the BR3X. You're going to set your, whatever voltage you're doing, AC or DC, I would imagine DC. You'll set them both, if you want DC voltage and you want them to be wet, both jumpers to DC, both jumpers over here to wet, and you'll be providing voltage through that relay. So, because all of this is pretty elegantly described on the wiring diagram, in this video we won't dive into that in this overview of what the products are. Now, the application sheet, which is included and is a supporting document down below, continuing to go through, you'll be able to power it with AC or DC voltage. Then the next thing we have is a push to lock button, and that would be your inside, and it gives the location as well. Okay, here it is, single gang. It'll be illuminated when you're locked. And that's it. Very simple and straightforward. Not much to that at all. Gives the electrical characteristics, single pole, double throw switch, the voltage. Okay. Now the exterior half, and I was incorrect earlier, this actually does have a sounder on it. They don't indicate how many decibels. Oh, they do. Oh my gosh. 82 decibels, in fact. So there's a jumper, and when I was looking earlier, I missed the jumper. That jumper is what is going to control jumper off, no sound, jumper on, 82 decibels. Okay. Again, a single gang for the exterior. It'll be either sounding and lit or just lit when it's occupied. Otherwise, it's off. My experience doesn't tell me when you would want a sounder on this. Although, certainly for the handicapped, maybe sight is a challenge. So hearing it is what's crucial. That possibly is why this would be used. That concept's not, I've not run into that concept in the past, but obviously handicap compliant bathrooms, making them as handicap compliant as possible. You get into specialty hardware like in a nursing home, fire alarm detection systems connected to apparatus that will vibrate the bed. I can't see, I can't hear, but the vibration. Okay, so that's your outside. Then, of course, the last thing is going to be our switch, and that's just going to be a typical alarm switch that you're going to bump into. We won't get too detailed with that. And that's everything. There's nothing else. Those 4 primary components. Okay. Now let's switch to a screen view and go over all of the supporting documentation for all of this material, especially the wiring diagram. That's really what we need. So let's switch to that screen view. Now we're going to dive into the several and many uploads that are down below here, and in no particular order. We're going to start with the relay, the BR3X Advanced Logic Module and Restroom Controller. I call it a relay. It has many relays on board. Okay. A dry contact means there's no voltage present. A wet contact means there's voltage present. Okay. And again, your restroom kit contains these items. So when it comes to the jumpers, you don't want to power anything. You don't want to have it powered and change any jumpers at all. Always move both jumpers as a set. Be very mindful that if you are powering your unit with an individual power supply, you would select only dry. It would never be wet. An EL device, an electric latch retraction device, that's probably going to be powered separately. It's very likely that that's going to be running through a power supply, is the bottom line. So be mindful of that. When using wet output, set all desired positions wet and AC or DC before the module is powered. When DC wet output is selected, COM terminal positive and minus, positive and negative, is switched between normally open and normally closed. So power will be active, normally closed. If voltage input is AC, then you can run AC or DC out of the logic module. If your input is DC, then you'll only be putting out DC. So it has a rectifier on board. So this is important. The maximum load applied to relay 1 cannot exceed 1 amp. And that's where you need to be mindful of this. You could be powering a device that will far exceed 1 amp, especially with the inrush. Solenoid-driven items, of course, need to be looked at. Motorized electric latch retraction, you shouldn't have a problem, but you do need to calculate. You do need to know what the requirements are. And of course, sending more power or requesting more power through the unit will certainly damage it irreparably. Wet output is only available at relay 1. Okay. So you're going to have 3 relays on here. Relay 1, 2, and 3, and you'll only be able to produce wet on relay 1. So, I'm really thinking it's going to be beautiful for you to, if you have an electric strike or something that won't exceed 1 amp, you'd be in really great shape. Perhaps a magnetic lock. You know, if you're doing a fail-safe application, a magnetic lock may work very well. You know, electric latch retraction on something might work well as in addition. All right. When supplying the unit with AC input and selecting relay 1 wet and DC output voltage, note that the resulting DC output will be rectified AC input, and therefore about 40% higher than the AC input voltage. So when you are rectifying from AC to DC, it's not a DC signal, so you have to take into account this 40% higher than AC input voltage. Meaning whatever you're going to power needs to be able to handle that range of your voltage plus about 40%. So you'll see electric strikes that are rated from, you know, 12 to 28 volts. You know, just a range. So be mindful that the range of what you're powering will handle that. Relay 1 wet option is active for all functions. Relay 1 output dry. Set both jumpers to dry. Okay, because if you're doing dry, then there's no voltage there. If you're doing wet, set them both to wet. Both jumpers set to AC. Your DC, you know, if you're doing AC output or DC output. And that's where that comes into play. Wet output allows the BR3X to supply voltage up to 1 amp on relay 1 for powering maglocks or electric strikes directly. Rating of power supply which powers the BR3 must be at least 1 amp. So this thing's going to be able to put out 1 amp as long as you're feeding it with the ability to put out 1 amp. So, so there you go. Default jumpers make relay 1 dry, and that would be, of course, quite typical. AC voltage only available if you're powering it with AC, and DC voltage available if you're powering it with AC or DC. Each BR3X function is wired differently. Now what follows next is a description of the functions. So you've got these function codes and a description of what it does. Obviously a timer could be something very likely that you'd want to have in play. You know, you might, if you had a mag lock, you might want to give the timer time to get the door, to allow the door closer to close the unit, whatever that would be, you know, your code mandated minimum time to close, and then have the unit fire, you know, a second or two after that, or, you know, whatever. I'm just pulling things out of thin air, or not have a timer. Interlock timer, 3 relay sequence, you know, just typical BEA where there's a near infinite amount of possibilities. The equipment these folks sell is really only limited by your imagination. Your parameters, and then it's really on page 4 that they show you what you're dealing with. Now, in the face of the unit, there is, through the white covering, you'll be able to see the function code show up. Okay, press and hold the 2 function setup buttons in the lower right hand corner here, and obviously when you hold that for 3 seconds you'll go to step 2, and then you'll cycle through to get to the function that you need. Then of course you are going to get into your function button here, and then you're going to refer to your parameters. So that's pretty simple and straightforward. Relay hold time and delay time must be set for any relay that is to be utilized. Okay, so that's a tip. It's very good that they put that there. Someone might call and say this doesn't work. As we continue through, we have a definition of the inputs and the relays. and they're going to define what the different functions are. Okay. I don't see a definition on maximum hold time. Naturally, a standard maximum, delay time would be 30 seconds. You might have an electric deadbolt that has a door position sensor on it that, or maybe you don't have a door position sensor on it and you want to be able to hold the deadbolt, the electric deadbolt retracted until you know that the door gets into place. That might be a good reason for having that. I know we've done that in the past. Ratchet latching, that's basically just, one press on, one press off. Like a light switch. Close and hold indefinitely, will open and hold indefinitely. If you have a requirement for that where you want to control something where it is in that position until you actually reverse it. Two relay sequencer and inhibitor. So the bottom line is these functions you can read for yourself, because if you're doing, in my opinion, a basic restroom, much of the capability of the BR3X will simply be beyond what you're working on. Two-way, two relay. This is going to be stuff where you're going to be handling a couple of openings at once, which, very rarely. I've seen restrooms that have a door to a lobby area if you can call it that, and then there's a men's and women's individual door. I've seen that, and that would certainly be capable for the BR3X to handle with all of these capabilities. Okay. Relay status, this is what will read off to you based on what you have set. And then, again, typical BEA, there's troubleshooting at the end. And we won't go through this, but their equipment is just always so rock solid. So at this point, let's move on to the next document. Now the next thing that we want to move into and take a look at would be the wiring diagram of the typical restroom kit. So what's not included, obviously, according to the wiring diagram, is our push plates on the outside and inside are not included because there's no operator on this in this wiring diagram. If there were, you'd obviously have to have, push plates to operate the operator. So this wiring diagram is really talking about, or really showing us what the wiring would look like for the components that are indeed included, which is your push to lock button on the outside, your door position switch, your outside sounder. It is a sounder, okay, and then possibly an electric strike. As we discussed, you'd be able to power right off of relay 1, setting up as a wet scenario. So as you can see, you simply need to power the BR3X and it will handle the balance. Okay. And here's your power right here. So obviously you're going to, let's take a look at note 3. One power supply can be used to power all devices. So upstream of here is going to be your power supply, 110 volt coming into it, which will then send out your very likely 12 or 24 volt DC power. Okay, but you're going to be delivering AC or DC low voltage power to here. However you get it to there is, what's going to happen. Probably a power supply, obviously not, obviously rated at 1 amp minimum, which means you know, you need to be mindful what you're powering it with. You would want an enclosed power supply is what you would want. And very, very simple, common, straightforward. Okay. And this is what resets the system after the user exits the bathroom, the restroom. Okay. Now moving on to the cut sheet that's here for this item. It's a real consolidated view of what's being shown. Obviously, having an operator, the perspective of this is you're required to have ADA compliance. So you have an operator on a door already, a low voltage, low energy operator. You've got push plates on both sides of the opening, but now you need to come up with a restroom kit. The requirements are evolving. This will allow you to add on to the existing installation. Okay. Shows what the interior and exterior look like. Electrical characteristics. Related products. This is the item we're dealing with. The constituent, the subcomponent of the relay, the 3 relay. Your occupied indicator, your your outside, your inside, and your magnetic switch. The emergency kit can be bolted on as well, and that will, within reach of the commode, I would think, would be, well, not necessarily. I don't, where exactly this would be placed in the restroom would need to be determined, but that's going to give you visual and audible warning of what's happening. I am sure you can obviously wire this back to a monitoring station if there is such. Here is that power supply we had mentioned. So BEA will supply you with the power supply necessary. Obviously an electric strike if you're dealing with a cylindrical lock, not a mortise lock, be mindful. They say cylindrical, that means don't use a mortise lock on this. Not to get into a discussion of latch bolts on different lock types, but if you have a mortise lock, make sure that the strike you're using will accept a 3/4 inch latch. If you happen to have an exit device on the door, this would be a rim exit strike. And then, of course, transformers. Okay. Not much else to add to that, and that is the balance of the product brochure. The next document is that application note, which is included in the packaging with everything, so we won't go over that document again. Another nice document is a common application that you see here. Okay, this is the emergency kit version that's here, and having that illumination capability above the door is common as well. This, of course, is going to be your base application. Power supply. There's also a video down below that will show you the manufacturer's perspective on the entire kit, which of course we would recommend that you watch as well. A much more concise overview of the application. So let's finish up this video on camera and we will wrap it up. I will most certainly look to follow up this video with actually wiring everything together, demonstrating some capability, and we'll put together such a video at some point in the future when there is more availability of time to do so. Okay. Now, these are all your parts. Everything's there. Very simple system. Like I said, it's code in Canada and has been, I don't know, 2, 3, 4, 5 years. I don't recall. It's not been very long, but it's been a couple of years for sure. And the consensus, the common understanding is that code requirement's going to come down into the United States, probably into California first, which is why you see a company like BEA relatively recently offering these types of solutions. for the requirement. Getting ahead of it becoming infused into code is just the bottom line. It's an evolution in working with hardware more intelligently, and being able to do so in such a way that we are migrating away from just mechanical hardware. And that has been happening since, you know, magnetic locks hit the market in the 1970s. And being in the hardware business for 30 years, it doesn't really seem like electrified hardware is taking over. But that's only because you don't recognize change when it's one small drip at a time. It has changed cataclysmically. So if you're a hardware person who sells hinges and door closers and locks, yeah, basic electricity is where we all need to start with keeping up with the times. I may have said earlier, I maybe not in this video, but I know I've said in others, I was recently in Manhattan, obviously one of the oldest cities in the United States, and everywhere in Manhattan, one of the oldest cities in the United States, access control is everywhere on these 100-plus-year-old doors everywhere. Okay, so it's the new normal, electrified hardware, and doing so in such a way that really makes sense. Low voltage is nothing other than batteries. Just think of batteries in your remote. Okay, you've got a positive and a negative. The electrons need to flow. They actually flow in reverse order from where you would think from start to finish. They actually flow in reverse order. That doesn't matter. But low voltage is, I think, relatively easy to wrap our heads around. And we all, in order to remain relevant in the hardware industry, we need to be able to supply solutions that the market is obviously asking for. You know, it doesn't matter that I'm old and old-fashioned. Why would I need this on a restroom? Push the button, you've got privacy. When you're done, exit. Well, you know, the needs of our society are different than they were 30 years ago. So that's why. We have a lot more complicated problems to solve than just adding electrified control over a bathroom door. So we as industry experts need to rise to that challenge. Any questions on the Bea Restroomkit or any of its constituent components, especially the super cool Relay 3 or any other Bea product, please feel free to reach out to us. Thank you.